Hey guys, so we are in our final chapter of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I am so happy to just be done with this book. I just need a little bit of a break. Now we're still going to be annotating. I'm just going to do 3 different books, which will be On Freedom by Timothy Snyder, The Baby Thief by Barbara Brazant Raymond, and Stand from the Beginning by Abram X. Kennedy. That'll be the end of our November before we dive back into Harry Potter. So those 3 videos will probably be longer, beyond just giving a review, right? We're doing annotation, so there's going to be things that I'm going to pull out, whether it's certain lines. I know for definitely for On Freedom and The Baby Thief, I have quite a few lines that I want to cover. There's a lot. They are both very I'm trying to explain. Very heavy topics. I'm finishing up On Freedom now for my book club. Well, we're reading the second third of it for October and then the third for November. So I'm finishing it up. And then The Baby Thief, we had our book club, or we're going to have our book club as I'm filming this. But when I post it, I'll post both. So I'm going to post our book club live on TikTok. You guys are welcome to join. That is, I believe it's November 15th. It's that Saturday at 9 p.m. And then that Monday we're going to do like Kona, which is by Mary S. Pope, and everything is just heavy in November. It's about Lyncoya Jackson, Lyncoya, Lyncoya, and it's about the Trail of Tears and how President Andrew Jackson took a child in to say, hey, I'm not racist, hey, I'm a good guy, and adopted him, and then it's that child's story. So it is historical fiction, but it's based off a true story. This really did happen. I'm going to try not to talk as much about the adoption part. It'll come up, I know. Adoption always tends to come up with me. But it more in the historical context and not as much in the psychological part. Maybe a little bit in the psychological part, but more in the historical context. Anyway, moving on. This is our last video of book 1. Again, the point of these is to show that you can't separate the art from the artist because it bleeds into the work, and we're just annotating. This is just my annotation series. So there'll be things that I pick out, whether it's like good writing or bad writing, certain quotes that might hit hard. Like I said, On Freedom has a lot of it. It's about the different types of freedom that we may experience. And then The Baby Thief is about Georgia Tan and how black market adoptions became the big thing. It's really heavy, I will just say. But yeah. Anyway, moving on. Let's just get started because I have a lot to do. All right. So first of all, in this chapter, Harry is down, and he is at this point going to be fighting Voldemort, and he finds that Quirrell has Voldemort on the back of his head, right? That's what he's using the turban to fight against. And that is why he's scared. He's like, you hear him mumbling to himself, but he's really mumbling to Voldemort. We also learn that Snape the entire time has been trying to actually save Harry, even according to Quirrell. Snape felt that, well, we learn much later at the very, very end that from Professor Dumbledore that Snape owed, or Snape felt that he owed James Potter for saving him, and he didn't want to be in that debt, even though James has long since passed. And so that's why he was saving Harry. I think there were other things to it, like Snape still had love for Lily, and that also that Snape, although he looks like the villain, he is very close to Dumbledore and is like a double spy, and he knows that Harry is supposed to be a really big, like due to this prophecy of the chosen child, that Harry is supposed to be the one that really like defeats him, and so they can't lose their hope, right? My opinion in that. Anyway, we're going to continue on. Voldemort also tells Harry that his mother protected Harry with love, right? And so when we were talking about, was it the chapter, I think it was 2 chapters ago, when Harry started getting nightmares again, where there was the green light and the screaming, the woman screams, it was Harry's mother, right? It was triggering that memory of him that's stuck in his brain. And Dumbledore also said that love is something that Voldemort has never experienced. Now, we don't really find out more about Voldemort until book 2 of his childhood. But it's not something that he didn't have a warm childhood. He didn't have that connection. He was very disconnected. I'm not going to go into the psychology of that because I absolutely could, but it's definitely something that really did save Harry, right? Not just because of the Horrocks, but, you know, yes, Harry survived this incident when he was young, but not only that, there were people that came to protect him and that came to love him and try to hide him, although, you know, the Dursleys, right, were not good people. In the end, being with them was to hide him from the wizarding world, right? I definitely think the Dursleys should have done a lot better, but that is what it is. We can't go back and change, you know, they're not real people, but if they were, Harry would not have been in the best place despite all of this, right? Being in a protection program, maybe, because we don't know if Voldemort was still alive. There were hints to it. I also want to remind people that Voldemort is supposed to be like Hitler, right? And the Death Eaters are supposed to be like the Nazis. How they died, or supposedly died, they went into hiding, getting better, whatever. It's like, I almost want to say like a zombie-like version. Try not to laugh, but let's just remember that maybe even more neo-Nazi, right? A version of that, because this is supposed to take place in the 90s. And we know that earlier in the book, they talked about the Great War, which in 1942, which would have been World War II, right? And the very dark wizard. So let's keep that in mind. All right. Let's also talk. When Quirrell touched Harry, Harry's scars started with the pain due to the Horrocks. Again, that connection, because Voldemort accidentally, when trying to kill Harry when he was a child, put part of himself into Harry. Now, we find out later, and I think it was book 6, right, that Voldemort put himself into different items and beings, and Harry was one of them. And the only way to destroy the Horcrux is the only way to destroy Voldemort is to destroy the Horcrux. So eventually, we know that something's going to have to happen to Harry. However, because of that mirror, right, because Harry knew about that mirror, Harry didn't want the stone. He just didn't want Voldemort to get the stone, which ended up in his pocket, right? It was that little twist. And so the stone saved Harry because he was being pure. Now, after he destroys Voldemort, for the most part that we know of, right? Voldemort wasn't very strong. Dumbledore and whoever gets Harry up to the infirmary, and this is when Dumbledore is visiting Harry. He told, I think Harry had asked about the stone, and Dumbledore said he destroyed it with the he spoke with Nicholas and his wife. They knew that Nicholas and his wife were going to die if they destroyed the stone. And they had like only so much time, but they understood like, hey, I've lived a long life. This is the best thing. Do it. This is for the best of the world, right? Okay. I also want to note there was a line that said, humans do choose the worst things for themselves. And that hit me. And I've been talking a lot about, or I shouldn't say talking a lot, off the app, I've been getting more involved in politics locally, part of the local groups. We had our No Kings protest. I was out there. This is, before my surgery and everything. Going to our meetings, going to different book clubs, both locally and virtually. And we kind of are talking a lot about politics because politics plays a lot, not only in books, but just in our general life. And in one of our meetings a couple weeks ago, we were talking about, why do Republicans choose to vote against their best interests, right? That was specific. If you don't understand, I am a registered Democrat, although I am very progressive. I don't like everything the Democrats do, and I definitely don't like everything, for the most part, that the Republicans do. There was like one thing that Trump did recently. I was like, oh, okay, like that's one good thing, but like, I'll give credit where credit's due. Okay, and that was about, what was it about? Oh, that was about revenge corn, specifically, that I learned about. Anyway, because, sometimes, there's pros and cons, but there's mostly cons, 99, I would say 99% for the Republicans, in my opinion. But do humans actually choose the worst for themselves? I would say yes. I would say that we don't stand up enough for ourselves, right? And this goes to our next book on freedom, right? We may let me rephrase this. We may be misinformed. We may not have all of the evidence or the facts. And I think a lot of the times, as we were listening to someone who was a reformed Republican, she was saying that not only are they misinformed, right? It's a lot of propaganda. There's disinformation, and they don't want you to look up information. They will literally give you the exact opposite of what's actually happening, and then call it fake news about the truth, right? So they're drilling it into people's heads at a very, very young age. And this is similar to, what's happening, what's happened in books. We could go to the Hunger Games, for example, right? I don't want to give everything away because I do want to annotate it with you guys. Great series, by the way. But how young they were drilled in, like, hey, the Hunger Games, this is just our tradition, right? Does that make it right? Of course not, right? There were plenty of laws, slavery was once lawful. Does that make it morally okay? Of course not. Women couldn't vote. Women couldn't work, unless you were a Black woman or an Indigenous woman or, someone that wasn't white, right? They were underpaid. They couldn't be educated. They would send us to, sorry, again, trying not to laugh because it's not funny. They would send us to psych wards if we read too much, if we talked too much, if we wore pants. I hate skirts and dresses for the most part. Who knows if my style will change after I lose a ton of weight with my surgery, but for the most part, I haven't worn a skirt in a long time because I don't like pants. I mean, I don't like skirts and dresses. My bad. I like pants. And some people are the opposite. Like, it's there was a time where we couldn't do that, right? Like, this is the truth. Anyway, continuing on. Dumbledore also said, say the name or you fear the thing itself. As we know at least throughout the first book, and I can't remember into the others at this point, but a lot of people were scared to say the name Voldemort, right? I thought it was interesting how that was. Why we're not saying the name. Why are we choosing to hide it? This is like how America right now, especially in certain states, say like Florida and Texas, and there's other states that are banning books, right? Banning books about Black history, which even in northern, even in very blue states, we don't even get the exact truth, right? We don't go far enough into it. Banning books on Indigenous people, LGBTQ, if you're Latinx, if you're, Asian, Pacific Islander, etc. Like, they just want white cis, specifically white cis Christian, right? And we have to fight against that. We do. The fact that in our publishing world, it's about 4 to 5% are non-white, non-cis, non-Christian, mainly non-cis and non-white, traditionally published. And the majority of those that do that, who are in these two specific, end up being indie published, is because of that, right? And now, don't get me wrong, I'm an indie published author. I think there's pros and cons to both, and it very is dependent. But like, let's keep that in mind. Let's keep in mind that there have been publishing companies who have used, I'm going to give the example, Black History Month, and published a book about a Black man, I believe it was a Black man, by a white author. There's just so much wrong with that. Like, why? Let me clear things up. First of all, if you're going to celebrate Black stories, celebrate it from authors who are Black. Second of all, as readers, as consumers, we should be doing this all year round. okay, all year round. We should be reading diversely. And yes, I think it's important to look at who the author is. I think it's important to mix up who you're reading, right? If you're not reading enough about disabilities, add some disability representation. If you don't have enough LGBTQ, add some more representation. Look at who the authors are. Their stories don't necessarily have to be LGBTQ, right? But maybe the author is, right? I'm going to give it a great example. Emily Rath, although I can't remember if she wrote LGBTQ, but she is an LGBTQ author. And one of her books is a YA. Really loved it. I will be honest, I have not read her hockey series, but I really loved her YA. That's it. Like, it's that simple, right? Or I really love Kaylin Barron, for example. She's a Black author. She's also LGBTQ, so I hit 2 boxes. Although her books do have LGBTQ representation, they are also YA, right? They're in fiction, and they're in she has a YA horror, and she has I think some like middle grade. I haven't read those ones yet. The point is that there are authors who write in different genres, right? So it doesn't matter what genre you're in. If you read horror, for example, there's plenty of Native American, aka Indigenous authors out there. Besides Stephen Graham Jones, right? There's plenty of them. But there's also in, YA. There's in, nonfiction, fiction, romance, etc. Right? So it doesn't matter what genre you prefer. You can read diversely. So I don't want to hear excuses. I really don't. If I can find it for my child, who is one of the pickiest readers, and me, a non-picky reader, you can do it too, okay? Because we're on 2 different ends of the spectrum. Where was I at? Okay, anyway. We were saying, say the name, you fear the thing itself. So we're talking about how certain areas in the U.S. are banning books, right? They're hiding our history. We cannot do that. I'm not saying we should be ashamed of our history. We can't go back and change it. We can't go back, 100, 200, 300 years and change what happened. What we can do is we can say, hey, this is how our country was built. Here is what's going on. Here's the things that affect us, whether it's locally, statewide, or nationally. Here's how we can fix it. We do better. That's not putting blame on any particular group. There is blame, but it's the history, right? We, as white people, have a level of privilege. And yes, white women do have a level of privilege. Not as much as men. We have a privilege being cis. We have a lot of privilege being educated as well, right? The Republicans, as I was listening to her, to our guest the other day, she was saying that, education, they don't want education. So continue to educate yourself. Continue to read banned books. Continue to discuss things. But let's not hide things. And that's what I'm going to say. Say the name, you fear the thing itself. We have to continue pushing this. This is something that Germany did after World War II, right? Yes, shameful history. Every place has something in their history that is very shameful, right? Country-wise. Instead of hiding it away, they said, no, you know what we're going to do? What we are going to do is we are going to educate. We are going to honor those who lost their lives, and we are going to educate so this never happens again. Now, that's not to say there, haven't been flaws within Germany, but they are not cowering behind the wrong of their history. So let's remember that. All right. The last thing, my bad. The last thing that I have noted is love is the most powerful and defeats anger and hatred. Again, this goes back to our guest that we had at our local meeting. She was saying that, having been a Republican for most of her life and then changing from Republican to Democrat, she said being a Democrat is one of the hardest things you could do because you are caring and empathetic and you want to love, but it is hard to have the same connections because you don't align with the hatred, because you don't align with that type of anger, because you want the best for people even when they don't necessarily want the best for you, right? And she said, yes, unfortunately, there are going to be people that you may need to not address, or I don't want to say give up on, but not have these conversations with. And she said, the hardcore MAGA people, those that just tend to vote straight party, right, whether they're MAGA or not. In fact, I have an aunt who is running right now. She's running on the Republican locally, although her views align publicly or progressively. And I thought that was kind of interesting because, and maybe I'm biased. So as I'm filming this, I don't know the time of what the results are of the election, even though I'm posting this after. I know her as progressive, right? I know that she, even though she's registered Republican, she doesn't necessarily vote Republican. I know her viewpoints. And again, maybe it's me being biased. I have faith in her. I have faith in some Republicans who do not align with what is happening, for those who actually stand up and do good, right? And again, I'm not trying to pick and choose, right? There are going to be people that I don't like at all, right? But they may have done one good thing and be like, okay, like I can agree with that point. I wish, my party would stand up and align with that, right? Does that mean that we should then completely, I'm trying to like rephrase this. We have to continue these conversations. We have to continue to push. We have to continue to educate, to not just educate, like bring better education to different states, right? But we are fighting misinformation. We're fighting people who can't critically think. We are fighting people who don't understand research, not just like in person, right? That's one of the things that my mother, both my parents are highly educated, right? But my mother taught me at a very young age how to go into library and research, right? Not only her, but like my schooling, all of them like drilled it into me, like, here's how you research, here's how you do your MLA, here's how you do X, Y, and Z, right? Drilled it into me. This was also the coming of age of the internet and computer systems, right? And so while I am lucky, I am 34, coming up with this, I learned what reputable sources are. But as our guest was saying, those that are older than, 38, as she was saying, don't necessarily have those same skills. So where do you go? You have to double check. You have to give statistics. And for me, I worry, right? sorry, we're going way off Harry Potter here. For me, I worry because how do we show that they are being lied to when statistics are skewed? They're often, and the way that especially this administration here in the US is messing with things, right? I worry about that. Just my thoughts. But again, no one is perfect. Keep fighting. And like I was saying about art versus artist, and we're bringing it back to Harry Potter, there are going to be people like J.K. Rowling who, despite writing this decent book, I will say it went very popular for a reason, you know, rereading things, you can see things, you can see different perspectives, and as you learn, as you critically think, you can see it. You could see her bigotry kind of bleed into it, right? But also, like I was saying, she donates to organizations that are hurting people. She's constantly donating to an organization over in the UK to fight against trans rights. Now, I am a cis woman, okay? Although I am pansexual, I am cis, okay? I was born a woman. I feel like I'm a woman. That's just how I am, okay? That's a different privilege in itself. Some people don't feel that way. Science has shown that those that are transgender, I'm going to only go transgender here, their brains and their hormones show differently than what their sex is, right? Their biological sex. And so their hormones and their brain scans show the opposite. And they just want to feel like their outside reflects their inside. I'm going to ask those who are willing to answer. This is no hate to anyone, okay? What does a trans person having the same rights that we do, wanting to feel safe, secure, loved, having access to medical things, and no, we're not talking children, we're talking 18 and older, okay? Wanting to go by a different name or pronoun, what does that take away from your life? Because as someone who grew up around the LGBTQ, who grew up around teenagers in a homeless shelter, because that's where my mother did a lot of volunteering specific to LGBTQ, where these teenagers, right, I was quite young, were kicked out of their home for not aligning, not assimilating with being cis or straight, for example, were some of the most loving people. And that includes big stars like Harvey Feinstein, right? Who I have been blessed to meet several times, not just because of the shelter, but, you know, I've seen his, Broadway shows. The LGBTQ, if you were part of it, owes the trans communities, specifically Black trans women, a huge thanks for stepping up in the first place. They are a huge part of our community. We wouldn't have the same rights. We have to keep pushing it. We have to keep pushing for the same rights. It's not going to take away from anyone else. So what does someone being trans have to do with your rights being taken away? How does that personally affect you? And again, we're not talking about children. Children are not getting surgeries like that. That is a lie. Kids have nicknames. Kids may feel like they want to change their pronoun or their name. Personally, as someone who worked in childcare, who has a child who's gone through a phase where he wanted to change his name, you know, young kids, I'm talking young, they could want to be a dog and then a cat and then a snake, all in a span of a day, right? They're finding out who they are. They're using their imagination. That doesn't mean they're getting on hormones. That doesn't mean they're having surgeries. First of all, before you can even do all of that, you see a psychiatrist. They take blood draws. They do, you know, brain scans. They do a lot of things before they even get to the surgery. And not everyone wants to have surgery. And that's okay too. But again, we're not talking kids. Anyway, I hope you all have a fantastic, fantastic day. I will see you next week for On Freedom. That'll be a longer video, and hopefully I'll look vastly different because I will have had my surgery and have filmed this by then. Anyway, much love to you guys, and I'll see you next time.